Omar Selkirk, working in the commercial team at Worksome. I'm standing in for Sam Oren, the wonderful Sam, as many of you know. So if I do lack in filling his fantastic boots, I apologise in advance. But to get away from me and to talk about our panel, we have an interesting set of individuals, both from industry in terms of actually managing workforces in large, small organisations, medium-sized ones, but also those who are looking to consult, those who look at our future generations, and also our one and only VP of Products, Gunesh. Eleanor, how about we go through introductions initially? So if everyone gives us 20 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute if you dare, about who you are, where you're coming from, and what was your first job?
Oh, okay. My name's Eleanor Matthews, and I'm from Open Assembly. Open Assembly works with enterprises to help them adapt to working with open talent, which is really, really hard because it's an incredibly fundamental change. My first job was working for my dad, who was a dentist, which meant I held the sucky thing. You know the sucky thing? Which is a kind of simple job. But my dad would sit behind the patient making faces at me as I held the sucky thing. That was my first job.
I love that.
Evening, everybody. My name's Jen Swain. I'm Managing Director at an organisation called Beatfreeks, and we are a youthful, creative, insight-led engagement agency, and we specialise in scaling brand relevance for our clients, specifically working with young and diverse audiences. So for us, that's kind of that 16 to 35-year-old age range. And we do that across research and insight, consultancy and activation. And specifically, we're looking to understand that demographic as citizens, consumers and workers. And we've done that with the likes of Google, TikTok, Coca-Cola and DCMS, just to name a few. My first job was at Bournemouth University, which is where I graduated from. And that was kind of a follow-on from my placement year, which I did as part of a 4-year course.
Thank you, Mehmet.
Hello, everyone. Just got really nervous all of a sudden. I'm Mehmet, Aslan. I work for Oliver Agency. I am the resource manager for our UK and Europe Central Hub. We are in the Times 100 top companies to work for. Just a little plug there. My first job was. Are we talking about like proper job, or are we talking about like?
Yeah.
So my first like job was like working at my dad's chippy, and I was only 14 years old. But then my first job like in the real world was I worked for Jessop's as a camera expert. Yeah, and that's.
Do you remain a camera expert?
Depends on what kind of pics we're taking, you know.
So evening everyone, my name is Shannon Swift. I work for Accenture. My role is External Talent Strategy Lead for Europe. I've got a few peers in the audience that manage from a global perspective as well. My first job, the one I don't like to admit, is I used to be a cleaner for 5 days a week after school from the age of about 15. But the probably better one, more career-focused one, was I worked for Jaguar Land Rover on the graduate scheme in procurement, which I still remain today.
Amazing.
Hi everyone, I'm gonna also hold up a silly microphone to my face. Has no purpose, but we're recording. So hi, welcome. Thanks for coming, and it's really nice to meet you all. My name is Gunesh Italiaander. I'm the VP of Product at Worksome. I actually joined Worksome about 3 months ago, so I'm fairly new to the company and even, newer to the industry. I have not worked in external workforce management before, so all of my insights that I want to sort of relay back to you tonight, I guess, are going to be completely, seen by fresh eyes and what I've kind of, heard from you and the rest of our clients. So I've been in the innovation and sort of disruption space for the past 14 years. My first job was actually in sales and marketing, funnily enough. And I didn't stay there for too long. I did that for 1 year and moved into product, digital space, marketing, and then finally found my way into product management and managing product and design teams and data teams as well. So I've spent quite a few years working for BCG. Later, I've moved into the startup world, where there's a lot of chaos happening, and finally found my way into Worksome, not having worked in this space, but it's hugely exciting because it's an industry that is just so ripe for disruption. Yeah, really excited to be here.
Thank you. I kind of want to start with the audience as well. What's my first job? Yes. Actually, can I point something out before we really kick off? We have 3 Turks on the panel, which I love. So we're fairly overrepresented. But other than that, my first job, I did paper rounds. It was £4.50 a week, which I think is slave labour. It was fairly flexible. I had to arrive between the hours of 5:30 and 5:35. But yeah, that was my first tough job. Going back to the audience, quick hands up in terms of, have you ever been involved in hiring anyone in your company? That might be an interview, that might be deciding who you want. Pull your hand down if you think it's got easier to hire people as time goes past. So we have one who thinks it's got easier to hire people. Oh, okay. Thank you if you govs in the audience. I run amazing polls. But basically, I think this is a representation that we all think it's getting tougher. It's getting increasingly competitive. And there's this discussion around the war for talent, right? So I want to initially talk about the war for talent, and then maybe potentially discuss what else exists in the space that's making it tough to hire people, and then move on to what the future looks like. But if we're to kick off, can I pick on you, Mehmet, as a fellow Turk? Do you think it's getting tougher to hire people, and where's this talent going?
100% it's getting harder to hire talent. I think there's so many different aspects of it. One, I think because there are so many new companies as well. There are so many, there's so many more employers, there's so many more options. The thing is, there's so much talent out there. There is the market is currently candidate focused, like it's candidate driven, where there is talent out there, but it's getting harder for companies to hire the talent because everybody's expectations have changed in the past 2 years, I think. It's not just about the job or the title or the salary anymore. It's about the company values, the benefits, the work from home, the hybrid working. There's so many more elements of it. And I'm a big example of that at the moment as well, because I left Oliver back in April. I went to Warner Brothers and I stayed there for 6 months, and I boomeranged back and came back to Oliver because the company wasn't what I expected it to be. And I think a lot of people have a perception of big companies to, be in a certain type of way. Like they have expectations of that company, but until they actually experience it for themselves. And when I went in, it was not what I expected it to be. And I did not enjoy it. So I left.
So circumstance, saying it's a talent-focused market.
It is a talent-focused market. I think the difficulty is what companies are able to offer to the candidates nowadays.
So the competitiveness is very high.
Yeah, there's so many different factors of it. It's, a lot of people won't accept a job if they're not hybrid working anymore. A lot of people won't accept the job if it's, they have to travel in for 5 days a week, or if they don't offer a certain benefit, or, sometimes salary competitive. Everything is all competitive. It all depends on what you can offer to that person. Because the thing is as well, that person has the upper hand because they are probably interviewing with so many different companies that they have their pick of the bunch. The roles completely flipped in the past 2-3 years.
Shannon, can I jump to you? What's your experience at Accenture? Going from a mid-sized company at Oliver to a fairly large global organisation in terms of where is the talent? Where are they hiding?
So I think it feels like they're hiding everywhere right now. Nowhere we can find them. So I think talent shortage, I think the latest Manpower report has said that we're on a 16-year high in terms of a global talent shortage. And I think we are definitely seeing that. And then from a macro perspective, it's supply and demand side. From a supply perspective, the baby boomers, they're looking to retire, they're looking to leave the workforce. The workforce generation that's coming through the mix, they don't really have the skills that we're ultimately looking for. And then with Brexit, the war in Ukraine, etc., is also limiting that supply that's coming through that we can use and work with. And then from a demand perspective, in the tech space specifically, the people who we competed before for talent was a small set group. Now every organisation out there wants tech talent. So if supply has reduced and demand has increased, it only equals the talent shortage. So that's what we're seeing everywhere. And it's, for us now, it's looking at our talent strategy. How do we adapt? How do we change? What can we do to make it an attractive place for people to work and also want to stay?
Yeah. Eleanor, do you mind if I jump to you?
I don't mind.
Amazing. What are your thoughts? Because you have a plethora of clients. You work with big companies, small companies, medium-sized companies.
We do. And everyone is experiencing the crunch. But as we work with organisations and help them to map out the different options for accessing talent and help move their mindset away from capturing people within the walls of their organisation, it becomes clear that they haven't disappeared. Guess what? Those people did not disappear in a puff of smoke when COVID happened. But the number of freelancers increased by 34% because people thought, I don't have to go to work. And if I don't have to go to the office, does that mean that I don't have to work locally anymore? Does that mean that I don't have to work with this little group of organisations which happens to be accessible to me? I'm in tech, I could work for Google. If I'm willing to go online, work strange hours, whatever they demand of me, I can do that. And so a lot of people made that shift during the COVID and immediately post-COVID time to adopt a new, more freelance way of working. And I'm going to do a tiny little plug for Lizzie Penny and Alex Hurst's book, Work Style. If you haven't read it, read it. It's an absolute game changer and explains exactly why people are making that leap from the security of a job, the perceived security of a job, to the actual security of putting themselves on the market and hugely expanding their horizons and their access to opportunity.
Amazing, thank you. Jen and Ganesh, I haven't come to you, but if you want to add anything else, please do.
I think Eleanor and Mehmet, everybody's made some great points. I think there's a palpable shift in power in terms of employees, and I think particularly when we talk about talent, I actually think there is personally no talent shortage. I think actually what's happening is the concept and the expectation around what talent means is actually being rewritten, but it's by the employee, not the employer. And I think we need to get our heads around that as employers. That's kind of my input.
And moving on from that, I think there's a big thought around there's no talent out there, or they're hiding everywhere, right? What are the other barriers that you see today to actually accessing talent? Because accessing talent includes finding them, but what other barriers do you see in your organisations, around you individually, in terms of actually bringing people on board and making them want to work with you?
I'd love to tackle this because this is what we do all the time. Imagine you go into an organisation that's always hired in the same way, so they know what they're doing. And not only that, they have a whole part of their organisation that has been set up and written down processes and trained their people in how to hire in that way. That's the biggest challenge of all, is helping people to move to a new way of working. It's like James said at the beginning, this is a change issue. The talent's out there. There are 600, 800, depends who you believe, talent platforms out there. There are people all over the place. There are 58 million people just on freelancer.com. So it's not about the talent's disappeared. It's really, really complex. If you've got 600 talent platforms out there, which one do you go to? How do you look? So the complexity challenge is real. And then changing the internal mindset within your organization so that people are willing to accept the concept of a freelancer and change the way they go through a process. Understand, you can't see a CV and go through 3 interviews. It doesn't work, because by the time you've done that, it's 2 months later, that person's gone off to another gig. So you have to be much more agile, you have to be much more ready to make decisions. And that's at both ends of the hiring process. A decision to hire and then a decision to exit people if it's not working out. So that's what I think. Complexity and incumbency.
Shannon, I'm going to jump to you on that one. What kind of elements of complexity do you see day to day where you're working and around you?
So I think the challenge for us is it changes. Speed is definitely a thing. That's something we see. We need someone yesterday, and that's continuous. I think I do agree with you. I think there is that mindset shift. There's a lot of change going on, and we need to adapt to it. And it's about the organisations that can change the quickest, which will survive and thrive. So I think that's what I'm seeing. I think the only other thing to the earlier point is a barrier is probably legislation. I think it seems to continuously change, and we're trying to keep up and catch up. And okay, what can we do there? What can we do in that country? I manage Europe, and one thing in France is okay, one thing in Germany is not. And it's going to understand that and also keep up with the change. So that's another challenge that I also see, in addition to Eleanor's comments, which I agree with.
To add a slightly different flavour here, it's whenever I look around, there's job ads which are presented for full-time employees. I feel there's a very strong kind of attraction for full-time roles. There's good benefits packages. The employer branding is fantastic. For you, Jen, especially given the new individuals who are falling into the job market, what's happening in the freelancer and flexible talent space? Why is that kind of amazing atmosphere that we give for full-time employees not replicating for future generations who want to be more flexible?
I think it's that point of organisations not catching up and the speed with which they need to be agile and change to trends. Because, ultimately, the future to me is that the full-time 5-day-a-week job is not going to exist in the same way that we've all known it over the last 10, 20 years. So to me, it's just a case of people catching up with what reality is. And, in our team, we've got somebody who's running a theatre company, for example, and also doing 3 days a week for us. Those kinds of combinations of roles and skills, and it's only going to bring value, really. So I think it's just a case of employers and organisations understanding how that's going to benefit them, as opposed to trying to, as you mentioned, kind of bring them in and then lock them in.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. There's this kind of perception that you can't offer non-employees benefits because of the law, and it's really complicated. But there are organisations that do that. Look at what Distributed has done. Distributed's created a community of people who are used elastically. They talk about elastic teams. They come in, they work for them, they go off and do something else, they go traveling, whatever they want to do. But they're offered benefits as part of working there. So they get their gym memberships and all of that stuff. They can make it work. So it's not impossible. And more organizations are springing up in the ecosystem to enable freelancing. There's a real recognition that this is an important contributor to our economic future, both in terms of people creating careers for themselves and organizations gathering that value that can be delivered by those people. And so it makes sense that there's going to be an ecosystem of people offering insurance, access to financial services, all the things that have been denied. I don't know if anyone's worked freelance in here. You try and get a mortgage. It's really, really hard. But I think people are waking up to that now and doing a much more accurate risk assessment around what's the real risk in taking on a freelancer. Look at their history, look at the options out there, look at the direction that the whole world of work is going. It starts to feel a little bit less risky. So as things become more accepted, things will change.
That's really interesting. And Mehmet, can I jump to you as well? Because I know Oliver, one of your, raison d'etres of existence is saying we endorse and love a freelance model.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not too sure if anybody is familiar with our business model here, but we basically build and place in-house ecosystems onto our client site. But our whole business model is also about flexibility. So if there is a month where our client needs to take a break or they need to reduce people or stuff like that, we always have that flexibility for them. And we hire thousands of freelancers throughout the year, and we do thrive on that as well, because these people are as important to our business as they are as any FTE employee, because they come in on our pitches, they come in on our big campaigns, and they work on loads of our big production stuff, and it is really important. And the thing is, we kind of need an outside perspective of it sometimes as well, because sometimes if that person is living, breathing your company, the values, and the way that they work, and they work with the same creatives all the time, sometimes you kind of get not lost, but you kind of always think in a certain way. So we need these people to come in and give us ideas that are outside of the box, that think in a different way, and then from them we learn as well. I think freelance, like I freelanced for a little while myself, and I think for me it was just personally for me, I just didn't like the fact that I didn't have job security. But when you like you mentioned, if you look at a freelancer from like a financial perspective, they are actually a lot more stable than any FTE person, I think, anyway, because that person has got to guarantee themselves that they can survive in a certain aspect as well, whereas an FTE person has that guaranteed salary. So I think freelancers are so much more important, and part of our 2023 strategy is we are going to employ more freelance more than FTE employees, because one, we need the flexibility as much as any of our clients do as well, and second of all, there's so much more freelance talent out there, and there are so many people that we would want to work with as well. So I think it's freelance is important to any business and to anyone then as it is as FTE employees. Yeah.
Thank you. Ganesh, jumping to you. I think we've heard a few complexities that exist, right? If it was legislation, if it was finding people, they're hiding in different places. Where do you approach it from a technology perspective? You've got fresh eyes, you're fresh to the industry. How do you see the current technology providers offering a solution here?
Yeah, so the technology side of this has been really interesting, and I completely agree with some of the things that the panelists have already said. Things like, I also don't believe that there's a talent shortage. I think there has been a mismatch where, talent is there, they've changed their views, they've changed their ways of working, the rules of engagement. And somehow the organizations and the talent aren't meeting in the middle, right? And we're not moving as organizations, we're not moving fast enough to grab them, but there are other opportunities for them which they grab and go after, and somehow that creates the perception of I guess, a shortage in a way. So the rules of engagement have changed, and the workforce have changed. And when we look at technology, obviously technology hasn't necessarily caught up with this. So, I'm talking to a lot of clients, and there's a lot of obviously knowledge within Worksome around how convoluted the current tech stack is for being able to hire someone, onboard them, employ them, pay them, contract them, and get even insights for an organization to give the overall view of, how much are you spending? What are your people doing? How many people do you even have in your organization that are running around and, contingent workers? So there's currently no view of this in any of these big organizations. And I think what happened is that they've been caught off guard a little bit, and things got a little bit out of hand. They don't have the technology to be able to manage and track, but they're relying on their current technology. And when I say technology, I mean things like VMS systems and other systems that they work with HR and in procurement and in finance that are not necessarily built for this use case. And I think what's happening is that there's a use case that's emerging, which is going to be very predominant in our future. And so there's no, and when you look at the incumbent players like these VMSs and the technologies out there, they're really dinosaurs in this industry. They're not necessarily catching up. I think they see that there might be an opportunity in there somewhere in the horizon, but they're not necessarily innovative companies to be able to come in and say, we're going to cater to this use case. This is now really, this is the future of work. And we're not really seeing that. And that's where technology is really failing us, I think.
Can I just add something? I think technology is our worst enemy and our best friends at the same time. And I think what a lot of companies do, I think what most companies do is they try and implement the same systems that they do for all of their permanent employees. So I feel like that stops companies hiring faster than they should be able to on a freelance basis. Because, everything is becoming automated and everything, but then there's a physical element of it, getting a kit sent out to somebody or, wherever it may be that they need something physical sent out to them. And I think there's like errors in the process. And I think that needs to change I think what needs to happen is they need to separate the freelance world to the FTE world. And they need to develop different ways for freelancers to work compared to FTE employees. Because another thing that stops a lot of companies employing a lot of freelancers as well, it's the regulation that came into place in 2019, 20, do I dare say it, IR35, which is the bane of my, I hate it. So I'm not going to swear, but it's the worst thing. And I dealt with it in the public sector back in 2016 as well, because it came into play into the public sector. And that's when I used to recruit into the public sector. And I can still have a conversation with somebody and nobody still can tell me everything that is there is to know, because no matter what conversation you have with somebody, they're going to be like, let me check back with you. Let me get back to you on that. Nobody really understands it. And the thing is, the legislation can be manipulated so easily that that's what everybody's doing now. But the thing is, I think there isn't enough information out there for employers and employees on IR35. And I think a lot of people get scared of it, because it is the government. So I think, that's another big thing that I think is a problem.
Yeah. Jen, jumping to you, but also I'm going to say, anyone from the audience, please do speak up if you have any thoughts. We talked about IR35, supervision, direction, and control. Hit me up. How? What? No, exactly right. I feel like. No, this is my whole point, right? It's what on earth is going on? How we think that, or from your research and your work, that the future generation wants to engage in a completely different way, and this is the workforce not of tomorrow, it's today, right? How do they get around these things like IR35? How do you think that they will manage the complexity?
That's a multi-layered question.
I'm so glad you didn't ask me that.
If you want to help me out, feel free.
You started it.
Sorry. I think, let's be honest, looking for a job that is going to appeal to you is a difficult thing to do. It has always been a difficult thing to do. And now, as Mehmet said, so many different choices and employers and things to think about. I think the way that, particularly when we're talking to Gen Z in terms of the research that we do around the future of work, it's what's coming across as, okay, I can't control that much that's going on in my universe right now. So I control the things that I can. And I have some choice and some agency in organizations I want to look for. So I know that, Gen Z particularly want to work for largely organizations that have some sort of social purpose or are going to do some good in the world. Literally some research done in the last kind of month or two has shown us that. So from that point of view, they're narrowing their aperture by making choices. So we know that. We also know that social media is a great way for Gen Z in particular to find out about organizations. And I don't think enough organizations have kind of jumped on that bandwagon. So we're working with a variety of different organizations who are starting to look at user-generated content as part of their recruitment strategy. Because actually what that's giving is a layer of authenticity that you can't achieve as a brand trying to speak to the people you want to speak to. And, this is a slight sneak peek into my sort of future of work predictions, but we're talking about marketing departments and recruitment departments working more closely together, because actually your fans and your people who are going to buy your products might be the same people that want to come and work for you. So thinking joined up in that respect, really, really quite powerful.
Yeah, and actually question to the slightly larger corporations there. Shannon, Where do you sit with, say, your strategy to make it easier to engage with a, slightly intimidating organisation like Accenture for, say, Gen Z? Where do you think brand image plays a role there?
I think brand helps us a lot. I think there's no getting away from that. I think as soon as, hopefully, a lot of the generation here at Accenture, they know what it is. I think maybe you've even seen our advertisements on TV recently, and there's a lot more engagement. We want it to be in people's unconscious brain about the brand and what we stand for. And we're seeing it, some of the things we're trying to do in terms of the ethical culture and the focus. I&D is a real focus for us. It's something that is ingrained through everything we do. And we know that the future generations, they don't want what their parents had or their grandparents had. They don't want their 9 to 5. They don't want job security, long-term employment. They want flexibility and adaptability. So it's about how can we get that message across to say, this is what we can offer you. This is some of the work that you may see, and this is what we stand for as a business. I think that's now far more important than it was before. And I think they want meaningful jobs. They want to know that they can add value to the world. And that real shift is something where we have to shift our marketing, shifting our branding, and making sure people understand that. And that's what we track, we measure, we monitor. We say, are we on the right path? Are we not? Because we need to adapt. A bit like we've talked about already on the panel, we need to adapt, we need to change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. On that point of adaptation, Eleanor and Ganesh, a question towards you. We were talking about this earlier, weren't we, Ganesh? We were saying that if we look at industries like insurance, banking, etc., so many of these have been disrupted. I use Monzo now. I don't use my HSBC account. I go to a to a insurance company like what they call Watermelon. It's absolutely not Watermelon, is it? And I get my phone insurance through them. Can't even remember who they are. But the idea is so much of the industry in the world has been disrupted. What's going on with the hiring space, with the flexible talent space? Why are we still using technology and organisations that were created for yesteryear, 10 years ago?
Ooh, well, I've worked in outsourcing for the last 20 years, and outsourcing is something which directly affects people's jobs, lives, sense of self, because their job might be going to another organisation which isn't the organisation they chose. Might offer them a better future, doesn't matter, they still don't want it, they still don't want to have a bar of it. So I think that is slowing everything down. This, the changes in the ways of accessing talent are even more of a threat than outsourcing, because at least there's some certainty around an outsource. You know that you work for Imperial Tobacco today and you're going to work for Capgemini tomorrow, and they're both big brands and they're both big names and they're structured and they're organised. If your organisation says to you, we are going to move to a hybrid workforce where we have internal employees and we augment that with flexible expert skills on a short-term basis, you're left thinking, well, am I not enough of an expert for you? And it's about helping people go through that change and create a meaningful way of talking to people to say, no, you're the people who are retained within the organisation. This is a hybrid workforce strategy. We need people within the organisation to get certain types of work done. And there are certain types of work where the people do not need to be within the organisation. It's a really, really difficult change. And because it's so emotive and it's to do with employment, and we as a generation, and probably not so much the generation that's coming up behind us, but we as a generation are so defined by our work. We were asked when we were little children in the playground, what do you want to be? And I've been disappointed ever since that I'm not an astronaut. Astronaut. No, I am one of those, yeah.
Why is this industry so tough to disrupt? What's going on?
I mean, I don't believe any industry in particular is tough to disrupt. I think because everything is disrupted in the end, right? If you look at sort of disruption as a theory or innovative disruption, every industry in the end will be disrupted in some shape or form. So that's what the theory says, and that's what we see in the real world. I think there hasn't been any, if you look at the industry as a whole in sort of contingent workforce, so there's lots of players coming in from the marketplace side, right? So they're, let's supply talent. And then you look at organizations and their ability to interact with those marketplaces, and then there's lots of hurdles, like legislation, compliance, legal, all these hurdles. Like, how do we even tap into this marketplace to get the talent that we need? And I think that's where the problem starts. No one's really thought about giving the right tools to organizations to be able to tap in to that, river of talent, or, whatever it is, like this flexible workforce that Shannon's laughing at me now, but, this flexible workforce that you need just yesterday. You needed someone yesterday. So how can you tap into that talent pool in the compliant way that your organization requires you to, and still, using your own sort of legal framework in the market that you're in? I think that's where the challenge is. So we can't expect these companies, enterprises, and big businesses to change the way they work overnight. That's not going to happen. So what startups and disruptive and innovative players need to do is come in with solutions that are specifically tailored to those organizations and their legal and compliance frameworks, in those markets, and then be able to allow them to tap into those talent pools. And I think that's where that's where the interesting kind of solution space begins for a lot of startups. I think people haven't necessarily addressed that yet, which is obviously something Worksome is looking at, solving for a lot of companies. And disruption generally, it starts in, I guess, in a smaller scale. So we're not going to see a company come and take over. We're not going to see the likes of Oracle, come in, all of a sudden come with these innovative features that allow companies to now, all of a sudden tap into a flexible workforce, because that's not what big companies do. They're not going to necessarily invest in that. They've already sort of down prioritized that, because that's not where the money is for them. So, and that's the interesting thing for startups coming in, right? So you start targeting segments that these companies have primarily ignored, which are now becoming more and more important, and you start winning there. And then the more mainstream people start noticing you and start purchasing. And that's where I think we're going to see adoption and behavior change.
Thank you. I think Rishi was earlier looking at me in a fairly aggressive way, saying, "Stop talking and let's wrap it up." Final point from everyone. I'm going to simply ask, in terms of advice, in terms of one thing you can say to the audience, to yourselves, to fellow panel members, when we look at the flexible workforce moving forwards, what would it be? What would you advise us today in terms of our systems that we're building, the structures around us? How can we improve them moving forward?
I would say crack the compliance nut and you get 80% of the issues off the table, because people can always lean on compliance challenges when actually it's an underlying uncertainty. So that's my suggestion.
So I think thinking about the year ahead for me, and this isn't necessarily about acquisition of talent, it's more about holistically thinking about talent. There are now 5 generations in the workforce. So dealing with your internal communications in a way that makes sense to your new Gen Z coming in, to your Gen Xer who's maybe leading teams and managing things, how do you bridge that gap? So putting some focus around that would be my top tip.
I have 2 things. Make it user-friendly for one, and second of all, listen to the younger generation, because they are the most relatable and they are the future of our workforce. So their opinion, I think, matters the most. So all the people who are the older generation need to let go a little bit and just take their advice. Is what I would say. Yeah, what are you offering?
Shannon, any thoughts?
So I think a lot in the past we've focused around EVP, employees, how we bring that value. We need to shift that focus in terms of the workforce and talent as a whole. And I think one thing that I would say is a lot of times we sometimes focus internally. We look, okay, what can we do? What can we do? And sometimes we don't step back and say, what are other people doing? What can we do? What's out there? What's the market saying? What trends are happening? What's moving quickly? So I think that would be my second tip would be make sure you never just look inwards. That's easy to do, but always look around you. What's happening? What's changing?
Gunesh, finally from you.
Yeah, I guess my final thought is, I would encourage companies to think about total workforce management rather than seeing it as, here's my contingent workforce, here's my full-time workforce. Those two components need to merge at one stage, and that's the future that we're betting on as a company. And that's, and I would really encourage organizations to think of it like that, because that's how you're going to get value out of your people, of the talents in the market, and engaging people on their terms and having the flexibility and the technology to do that.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Appreciate all of your presence at the panel. From now, I believe we shut and close the doors, so don't be locked in after 8 o'clock. Until then, it's pizza and cocktails, drinks, beer and wine, or water, pineapple juice, whatever you like. Keep the discussion going. We really appreciate all of your presence here. And hopefully this will be the first of many where we can discuss on panels, in groups, in circle discussions, and keeping the conversation going around what the future looks like for external talent.